Chance Dorland, and this is In-Depth, an interview program from ExpressNews.com with in-depth reporting and other resources for stories affecting San Antonio and Bexar County. Following Express News coverage of an off-campus fight that last Friday ended with a student facing murder charges, Steve Zimmerman, the principal of James Madison High School, has sent an email to parents defending his campus, noting that he takes it very personally when someone chooses to make Madison appear as a less than desirable place to go to school. I'm joined now by San Antonio Express News education reporter Alia Malik to get details on the fight that involved 3 female students who have attended Madison High School, one of whom was stabbed and killed. So Alia, thank you once again for joining me here on the In-Depth podcast. Let's, of course, start with this attack. It took place about a week ago. It involved 2 18-year-olds, a 16-year-old, and one of them is now dead.
Yes, that's correct. The fight occurred early Friday, pretty much overnight Thursday into Friday of last week. What ended up happening from what the girl who was arrested told police and other things that we've been able to piece together, it seemed like the student charged with murder, who we're not identifying because she's a juvenile, she and the 2 18-year-olds had all been kind of feuding on social media. The 2 18-year-olds told police, at least the one who survived told police, that they had gone over to the younger girl's house to, quote, jump her, to attack her. And that ended with the younger girl stabbing both of the older girls. And Caitlin Castilleja, one of the older girls, did end up losing her life.
So as you just pointed out, police say that the now deceased 18-year-old Madison graduate, Caitlin Castilleja, and that 16-year-old minor who stabbed her, they'd been feuding over social media before the fight. And Castilleja's Twitter account shows she posted taunting and confrontational tweets and also retweeted at least one video of herself in a fight at school. Castilleja's online presence has also revealed a number of aggressive posts on social media, including ones where she boasts of engaging in physical fights. While that all appears to be the case, 2 Madison students also recently told the Express News that the school has a culture of physical fights, and that's something Steve Zimmerman appears to have a different opinion regarding his school. So tell me about the email that he sent out following the stabbing.
Yeah, so first I wanted to clarify, Caitlin Castilleja, who is dead, did have some, I guess, confrontational Twitter posts, but so did the 16-year-old who is arrested in this case and charged with murder. I'm not sure about Vivian Foster, the girl who was stabbed and survived. I'm not sure what her social media, whether there was anything like that on hers, but it definitely wasn't a one-way street. It wasn't just Caitlin Castilleja who had kind of the threatening and the taunting social media posts. And then yes, you're correct that a couple of Madison students told one of my colleagues Friday after dismissal that in an environment where, this had just happened, one of their schoolmates had just been charged with murder and everyone was talking about it. And so these 2 Madison students told my colleague Krista Taralva that they felt that there was a culture of resorting to physical violence to solve problems, and that they saw a lot of fights, and that the fights had become basically unremarkable to them. And so the principal responded to that kind of statement in our paper that we attributed to the 2 freshmen by name who said it. And, he wasn't happy about that at all, using the term culture of physical violence. I think he just disagreed with that. He disagreed with that as a characterization of Madison High School. And so he wanted to reassure parents that he said that there were fights at school, of course, but it was a small number of students who were doing the fighting, especially when you consider that Madison has more than 3,000 students. And he just highlighted all the positive things about Madison, all the programs that they're known for and the awards that students have won. They do have a really well-reputed agriculture program. And he just named all the ways that he was proud of Madison, and he wanted parents to feel that it was a good place to send their kids to school. And he invited parents to contact him via phone or email if they had anything to say or any questions.
So obviously a bit of a disagreement, or at least two different ideas of what's going on at Madison High School right now, one from the principal and one from, as you just mentioned, two students who spoke with the Express News, and then also reporters at the Express News writing the stories that appear in the paper and online at expressnews.com. You're an education reporter. How would you describe the coverage the newspaper has had about the school and about the stabbing over the past week, and maybe describe about how you and other reporters go about covering education when something like this happens?
Yeah, a story like this crosses a number of different reporters' kind of responsibilities, because it just crosses a number of different facets of our life, right? So we had crime reporters working on the story, of course. We had one of our more experienced, feature reporters trying to talk to the families of the people touched by this. And we also had me and my colleague really trying to get talk to the school district and its students about how something like this affects them, because this was a crime that occurred off campus. It wasn't something that went down at a school, but there is a student who is now charged in this crime, and the other two involved had been Madison students, and they obviously all went to the same school together at least a couple of years ago. So in terms of the way we've been covering it, we've all just kind of been reaching out to the people that we deal with. The crime reporters have been talking to the police. My colleague and I have been talking to the school and students and just trying to piece together from all angles what happened and where everyone involved in this goes from here.
And so that being the case, what do you think about Principal Zimmerman's comments? It seems reasonable to think that when there is a situation like this, no matter the school, no matter what a newspaper might say about the situation, there's probably some damage control that's going on.
There is, and I think, and I think he in his letter, which was pretty long, he did say that he hoped that students learned from this not to resort to physical violence. He did acknowledge that there are fights. I mean, there are fights at schools everywhere, and he kind of talked a lot about how he felt that fights were handled quickly and fairly, and so I think he it's fair for him to want to tell parents that he doesn't think that their school is this like hotbed of violence. When we look at the data, which on mysa.com, another coworker of mine, Caleb Downs, did put together a slideshow kind of before all this. He started working on it with data from the Texas Education Agency about the number of fights reported in our area schools every year. He had the database school by school. Madison High School had fewer than 10 fights in the 2017-2018 school year. It was so few that they can't report the exact number for educational and data privacy reasons. And there were a lot of other schools that had higher numbers. I think there were almost 100 that did actually list numbers because they were higher than 10. So, as Bexar County goes, Madison doesn't seem like one of the worst places to be. And however, I would say that there were two students that said that this is how they felt. And, I think there's got to be something going on if students don't even bat an eye at fights anymore. That those two students might not reflect every student's experience, but they're freshmen going through this school like any other student, and this is what they see.
And so starting to wrap up here a bit, Alia, as we've mentioned, one 18-year-old has died due to her injuries within an hour or two after the altercation that took place about a week ago, while the other 18-year-old female survived. As you've noted, the Express News knows the identity of the 16-year-old girl who stabbed both of them, but her name is not being printed because she's a minor. She's been charged, though. Is there any way that this policy for not using her name could change? Might this come out in the future, or is this what's going to happen because she's a minor?
We have our own policy of protecting the names of minors. And it is kind of, I'd say it's probably reevaluated on a case by case basis. I mean, the police, for example, aren't going to release her name, but if her name does come out publicly, depending on, we just kind of try to make the most responsible decision we can about, whether to acknowledge that her name is out there and whether to print her name or not. Obviously, people's safety is involved, and the fact that she is a juvenile and might not want this to, she and people who care about her might not want this to follow her around for the rest of her life. I think that's why juveniles' names are protected to begin with under the law. So, I mean, it really is just it depends on the situation. And in the past, we've always made those decisions on a case by case basis.
And so obviously this is somewhat of a special case compared to other crime that is covered by the Express News and other newspapers in the area for the reason that you just mentioned. But that being the case, is there anything known about the current status of this 16-year-old? And then I'm also wondering about the next steps for both the police and Madison High School officials that you think might be taking place.
That's a good question. I don't know her current status. Sometimes juveniles are released to their parents because this is a murder charge. I'm not sure if she is still being held in custody or not. And that is something that we're going to try to make sure we know before the next article about this comes out. In terms of next steps for police, I mean, obviously this is a legal case. It has to go through I think a court, obviously just like any other case. It'll be different. It'll be different because it's a juvenile case, but there will be legal proceedings, and we'll see kind of what happens to the charge from there. I'm not sure about kind of who might be being interviewed by police or being called as witnesses or anything like that to try to flesh out what happened, because I mean, the people who were physically harmed in this case did tell police that they had attacked her. And so I'm not sure whether she's making an argument for self-defense or what. In terms of the school, I mean, the Caitlin Castilleja, who died, was not a student anymore. She was an employee of Northeast ISD's after-school program, and the Madison principal Zimmerman did acknowledge that in a letter he sent out on Friday. The student's education will obviously depend on what happens in her legal case. I'm not sure if she would be placed in like a juvenile justice education program or something like that.
Well, Alia, I appreciate your time. Obviously, this is a very difficult subject. Someone has died. A juvenile is either in custody or has been charged in connection with that death. So not a very easy topic to discuss. So thank you for your time and the details that you've given. I want to give you a chance for final thoughts before we say goodbye.
I just wanted to let anyone who's listening to this and who's interested in this case and who's been reading know that the Express News still is following the story. I'm personally involved in continuing to report on it, as is at least one of the other crime reporters here. One thing that I hope to do, some more solid reporting on is the role of social media in this incident and possibly other incidents like it. We know that at least a couple of the girls involved, there were videos that they posted of themselves fighting other girls, and students were taking sides and egging the girls on. And one thing that came up in my conversation with this and other school districts is that in a lot of these cases, no one goes to administrators or school district police and says, these two girls are going at it and someone might get hurt. And this applies to male students too, but the school districts don't necessarily know what their students are doing and saying on social media unless the students are mentioning the schools in their posts, which a lot of times is not the case. And so schools are really relying on students in some cases to come forward and let them know when even if their fellow students are fighting off campus, one of them might get hurt. And, in this case, it's easy to imagine that had someone let a school administrator or district police know that these two girls were getting ready to fight each other, they have a protocol where they contact the families, and an adult could have put a stop to it. We're not sure exactly what would have played out. It's all hypothetical, but I think the school districts and schools just really want to start encouraging students to speak up to prevent something like this from happening. And I think Principal Zimmerman said something along the lines of, we hope that this incident has taught you guys that violence is not the answer.
And thank you to San Antonio Express News education reporter Alia Malik for joining me for today's episode of In Depth, an interview program from expressnews.com. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Dorland.